Mhm.
Hello, my name is Angela Sanchez, and I am an LLM student at Penn State Law. I am currently in the Manglona Lab for Gender and Economic Equity. For the lab's Witnesses to Her Story project, we are capturing the experiences of women with a focus on their participation in education, sports, and the workforce in a dynamic era in the United States. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing Dr. Barbara Farmer, a trailblazer, glass ceiling breaker educator, mother of three, and the first African American woman to become a principal in the State College Area, Pennsylvania School District. Welcome, Dr. Farmer.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Dr. Farmer, did you always know you wanted to become an educator?
Oh, yeah. From a little kid in elementary school, I admired teachers, and I went to segregated schools, so I had black women. Because in my elementary school, we didn't have any male teachers; they were all female. And then when I went to high school, I got in the high school band. And at the end of the year for graduation, we played Pomp and Circumstance for the faculty to march out for the. And when they came out in their robes and their caps, I said, I'm going to be one of those one day. And I had such supportive, loving, relatable teachers in my life who saw something in me and made me feel special. And I wanted to do that for other children. So I got the fire from them.
I see. So you mentioned your elementary school, what segregated. Can you tell me a little bit more about your school? Was it co-ed even though it was segregated?
When we were in elementary school, throughout our public school experience, it was segregated. So the elementary school, and it was always co-education because we had everybody who wasn't white, and we also lived in communities where blacks only lived, and that's where the schools were located. So we had great experiences, and there was sort of like a second level of mothering, I think, because we had female teachers, and they could direct us, redirect us, share things with us, and our parents saw them as being very special people in our lives and gave them permission to be and do whatever they needed to do and be in our lives because we were with them that great part of the day. So they wanted their influence to be something that would be positive for us and that would ignite something else in us to want to be educators and things like that. So yeah, I knew early on.
So you mentioned that most of your teachers were female. Did you remember to have any male teacher?
I didn't get male teachers until I got to high school. And back then, we didn't have that middle sector where you have middle school like they do today. We went through K through seventh grade in elementary school and went to high school in the eighth grade. And when I entered high school, that's when the male teachers were present. My math teacher, my business ed teacher, and of course the principal. They didn't have like female principals back then. And there were several male teachers. Yeah.
So do you remember what kind of classes were you taking in high school?
I took the I did a mixture of the general curriculum and the advanced curriculum, the college bound.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite subjects was English. And I remember very vividly during my senior year in high school, I took the advanced English course from the Hampton University. At the time, it was called Hampton Institute, and just loved it. And I had teachers who were very encouraging with me in terms of how I used language and how I did the language homework and the language prep. So when I went to Hampton to college, I went there with credits already because of the advanced English course I'd taken in high school. I thought that was pretty advanced for us too back then because again, we were in segregated schools. So that was one of our perks, I guess.
So do you remember what kind of books were you reading for these like English and advanced English classes?
That's an interesting question. I, I can't say that I remember the books. so much as the basics of English language and writing, and being able to write well and put our thoughts down, that sort of thing. So we did a lot of that because, at the time you don't think about what they're doing necessarily, but they were preparing us to be able to express ourselves with the written word as well as the verbal word. So, and there were books, and in certain English classes, I remember a teacher, Mr. Calloway. He thought they used all kinds of books and plays in his English classes. But in my advanced English class, we were doing the college program type things. So,
You said Mr. Gallagher was one of your teachers.
Mr. Calloway was not one of mine, but he was a strong teacher in the building that everybody knew about and tried to avoid.
Why did you try to avoid him?
Mr. Calloway had a teaching style that was forceful in a different kind of way, and he had super high expectations. And that's okay because we were accustomed to high expectations, but when I took the advanced English, it was from a female, and she had a different sense of preparing us to operate in a mixed environment once we left high school. And so that, I think, made the difference for me. And I felt she was more approachable, and probably because she was female, you know, because that's what I'd been used to most of my educational, public educational life. But Mr. Calloway was a great teacher. He was known to be really good, but he had a presence that just didn't yield something for me. So I was glad not to be in his class.
So did you participate in any after school activities during high school or any clubs of any kind?
Actually, I was in the high school band. I was in the French club. There was one more. When I think of it, I'll blurt it out. But the band was the most wonderful gift of my day. And when I didn't know how to play an instrument when I went to high school, and we had a choice in 8th grade of learning how to play an instrument or sing to be in the choir. I sang in the church choir, and I didn't want to sing in the school choir. But more importantly, the band had, number one, a uniform, and I got to go out to play at the football games on Friday nights and travel with the band. And back then, that was the only way I got to leave home at night when I was in high school, was to go with the band, because my mother was real strict about what girls could do and where they could go and the time frame in which they could do those things.
So we're the members of...
And I belonged to the business club, I think it was. Those things related to, my interests.
So were the members of the band boys and girls?
Absolutely, yeah.
So you were traveling together?
Mm-hmm. And we had really cool uniforms. And our band was really good. We had over 100 members in the marching band. And we were considered, I think, the best band in town. My husband would contradict that because he went to a rival high school. But it was just wonderful. And you had in your sections, you created friendships. I was in the woodwind section. And then you got to know people, of course, even differently and better in the other sections. And I'll pivot for a moment. In the last 10 to 15 years, my husband and I have friends up in the Maryland, D.C. area. We went to visit, that he went to college with, and we went to visit them and discovered that one of their best friends was one of my friends from the high school band that I had not seen since we graduated from high school. So now we're friends. He and his wife are friends with my husband and me.
All thanks to music.
Music was my way out and my fun.
You mentioned that you were in the French club, and you said business was the third one?
I think business, French, and I think those are the two that stand out the most for me right now. And I was as a senior, I was a senior class officer. So I was just kind of, engaged in different activities at different levels in high school.
So what kind of activities were those?
We had clubs for the different languages. I think there was something for home economics, people who really wanted to continue enhance their sewing ability. And the interesting thing was we had to take home economics. I took that and liked it, but my sewing expertise came from my mother because she was a seamstress. So the classes at school were kind of, they were okay. But sometimes I felt like I already knew how to do what they were doing because my mom always had me with something in my hand to make at home. I would make my own clothes as I got older and, aprons and different things like that. So I felt like I was already a pretty good seamstress when I was taking home economics.
So you said that we needed to take home economics. Was everybody in the school mandated to take that class?
They weren't mandated. There were a couple of things you could take. I think shop was one, like wood shop or something. Home economics. Those were the two major ones that stick out for me right now. And we did have guys in home economics, but not many. They didn't want to be stuck with that label. So they took the guy thing.
What about the shop? Do you remember having girls at the shop class?
Yes, there were girls who were interested in that and involved in that, but there weren't many. Because, we were being very, I don't want to say prissy, but we were thinking in terms of what we wanted to do or could do after graduation. And even though the town we were born in, the Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company, is the largest shipyard, I think, in the United States. So girls weren't aiming in terms of things that would help them get a job in the shipyard. Okay. So we were aiming for things that, for homemaking. Oh, and yeah, because in the home economics class, you did cooking and sewing. So we were more in line, and I think even during that time, teachers were probably directing us more in those areas than they do today. Because today kids, anybody can take whatever they like.
Sure. So you mentioned that your mother was a seamstress. Was she like working to sell what she was making? Was she working outside the house?
That's an interesting question. My father worked two full-time jobs, so my mother wouldn't have to work outside of the home because there were six children. And she brought sewing from South Carolina, where she was born and raised, from her mother's house. And what I realized, and this again was something later in life, and I don't really sound morbid, but we were at a friend's funeral. My husband and I went to rival high schools and colleges. And one of his best friends, we went to his funeral in Maryland. And one of the young ladies from his class in high school, I knew them because we both grew up and started out in a project called Newsom Park in Newport News. And I knew some of the ladies, and we were just chatting. And one lady came up to me. She said, "I remember you, and I remember your mother because your mom used to make pretty dresses for me when I was a little girl." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah, my mother used to get your mom to make me dresses all the time." So then I realized my mother was using that as a trade or a skill. I'd like to call it a skill to earn additional money. And then I'll throw this in as a curve. We lived in a black community. The only white person we saw in our home was Ms. Murphy because she would bring clothes to my mother's house to iron. And my mother would iron her clothes. And that was another source of income for her. So I guess with six children, trying to get up and get everybody ready and go to work wasn't. And plus, they didn't have the types of jobs that would encourage her to want to use her skill set. And my mom went to school in South Carolina. The highest grade you could go to was the sixth grade. And at that point, you had to leave home and go to like a boarding school someplace else
I see.
in order to get the high school degree. And my mother came out of a family, I think, of 11 children. So there was no going to boarding school and that sort of thing. But she was really smart. She and my dad were both they weren't educated people according to the public education system, but both very, very smart. Because when I went to elementary school as a kindergarten person, I could already do mental math and read because my mother taught me how to do those things. And I skipped first grade because of what I came already knowing. So She was a at home teacher as well.
I see. So you said that there were six children at home. Tell me a little bit about your siblings.
Okay, I'm the youngest of six, and at this point in my life, it hurts me to say I'm the only one still left alive because I was the baby. Uh, had four brothers and a sister, and an interesting story about my sister. We were very different. She was very athletic and very smart at school and very popular. And I was not athletic at all. She played basketball and softball and all kinds of things. I didn't, my husband used to tease me and say I didn't want to get dirty. So I didn't do any of those kinds of things. Like I said, I did the band, and she didn't sew. So I did the sewing and things like that. But I had four older brothers, and two of them were excellent athletes. And one, they both played baseball. And my second oldest brother was so good at it when he went to the mount to bat, the opposing team would back up because he could hit the ball so far. And the field was in the recreational center yard, not far from where we lived. And there was a big swimming pool there for blacks. Whenever he went to bat, he would hit the ball so hard it would go across the field and across the swimming pool. So anybody on base, everybody got to come in. So he was very athletic, and my oldest brother was also athletic. And that other brother played basketball too. My next oldest brother was a baseball player, and they were on the same team from time to time. And the second oldest one, I think, was offered some sort of, I don't know if it was a contract, but an opportunity to go play for one of the farm teams, to go to the big league. But he hadn't been married very long, and I don't know that his family could stand that life. And it was such a different kind of offer and opportunity that even thinking whether or not the person would be treated fairly to take them away from their home and their protective community. But he ended up working for the government, and he did quite well. So
I see.
And then I had another brother, and he was more of a singer. He liked to sing. And all of three of the four boys worked in the shipyard, like my daddy did. And my baby brother, the youngest one, he was 3-4 years older than me, and I used to tell him he was the baby, but I was the youngest, because he that's just who he was, and we tease each other back and forth. So they were all athletically inclined, and my youngest brother was in the Boy Scouts, and I didn't realize I got stories of my life along the way, and I remembered vaguely that he had been, but I don't remember us having any deep conversations. But once I married my husband, he let me know that he was in my brother's Boy Scout troop, and my brother was the Boy Scout leader of his troop. I thought, I didn't know that. And even when my husband and I were dating, I didn't know that he and my brother had been friends long before then.
He was always in your way.
The boys were tricky about me being the baby girl. And if there were things that they were involved in or activities going on, if they didn't want me there seeing what they were going to be doing, my mother would ask them, do nice girls go to those things? And it's, no, Mom, nice girls don't go. So I didn't get to go to a lot of the things that they did. So, and that was my mother's question for so many things that came up in my life, being the youngest. She would ask my older siblings, do nice girls go there? Do nice girls do that? And if they didn't have the right answer, I didn't get to go. But it worked out okay.
So you mentioned that your sister was really athletic. Did you go to the same school?
Actually, no. All of my siblings were born in South Carolina. My parents were migrant farmers. And my daddy got tired of doing that kind of field work. And then you had to buy at the company store. And he would say some months he wouldn't make but $5 or $10 after he went to the store and paid them off for what they charged him and things like that. So he decided to leave South Carolina in the night and left my mom and my siblings here with his parents to take care of until he could send for them. And he would work and send money home to my mother in South Carolina. When they moved to Newport News, that's when I was born. And it was an interesting thing because when we would go to South Carolina to visit, I didn't really know. My siblings knew all the first cousins, but I didn't because I was a little girl, and I stuck real close to my mom and her leg, holding on to her dress because they were all so much older than me. So, but my daddy decided that his children were not, and pardon the pun, were not going to be farmers. So that's why he did the escape from South Carolina and went to Virginia. And the wonderful part was he stayed in a housing situation where people would rent rooms.
Mhm.
And when it was time to bring my mom and my siblings up there, they were building a project in Newport News. One section down the road was for black families. And if you went out on a major road and went down about 10, 12 minutes, the same section was down there built for white people. And when he discovered they were building the projects, he said he decided to go and get him a job because he figured if he helped build them, he could get one for a place for us. And sure enough, that's what he did. So, but he worked too. He worked in a shipyard from 11 to 7 at night, and from 8, 9 to 4 at a project uh, in Newport News.
Wow. Long day for him, definitely.
Yeah, he got a little, and then he had his own side business. He was a handyman. He could
Oh,
fix anything. He could fix your sewer. He could fix your heater. He could paint your house. He could build stuff, and it was never too cold for him to do anything outside. And he had one client who had some housing for rent, and she kept him busy fixing that up. So he actually was working 2.5 jobs.
so you mentioned that your brothers played baseball
Mhm.
at school. Do you remember if your sister was able to do any sports when she was like at school
She played softball and basketball, and she
with
was good at it. She played
the school
basketball in
team?
high school, and she was tough. She was a good shooter, and they knew not to get in her way when she was coming down the lane. So she was real good. But
Okay.
I would go watch them, but never thought I wanted to play those, and never did. I wasn't a sports person.
Yeah, you mentioned you were like into sewing, like, and you say that you made your own clothes. What kind of clothes did you like to make for yourself?
Started off with skirts because we didn't use patterns for those, so
Mhm.
it was easy to make a skirt. And I was in the junior choir at church, and our singing uniform was a navy blue skirt and a white blouse. And my mother would, and then when the band had the spring concert, we wore navy blue skirts and white blouses. And on the day of the concert, when I would go to, my mother would drop me off at school. By the time I got back home, she'd made me a new blue skirt and bought me another white blouse so that I would look pretty. So I started with skirts, and I remember one Easter I made a suit for myself. It was a dress with a matching blazer. So I tried all kinds of things. And then when I married my husband, uh, we've lived here twice. He came to graduate school from 1974 to 1977. And we brought a 3-year-old son with us, and then had a son in 1976 here. And because I wasn't working outside the home at that time, we put the first child, who's the only child for a few years, in the preschool program. And I went to Boalsburg to this sewing shop where I took sewing lessons for making ladies' underwear, men's clothing, and I ended up making my husband a walking suit and my son clothes. So that was exciting for me because I deepened my skill set. And they even taught us how to make the little knit shirts that the kids wear with little uh, rib knit collars. They taught us how to make those. So whenever my son had a birthday party for a boy or girl, because I would do it, you know, I would get the fabric and put the turtleneck on it, and that would be his gift for the birthday party. So, and then I started making my mother clothes. And when we would go home, I would have made her something. And she would be so excited. And then I started buying things for her. But she was so excited when I would get home. We would sit and hug and talk. And after a while, she would say, "Now, baby, you've been here for a little while. What you bring?" Because I always took her something to wear, or I would try a new recipe that she didn't try. So, and my mom and I were very close.
Good. So I want to dig a little bit deeper into your college experience in Hampton. You said that you were able to take that advanced English class in high school. Did you know from that moment that you wanted to go to Hampton University? How was that path going for you?
Actually, I wanted to go to another college because it was farther away from home. Virginia State University. I wanted to go there. And because I'd done well in high school, I got accepted at Hampton, early on. And my mom and I were discussing it about going to college and where I was going to go. And I said, I want to go to Virginia State in Petersburg. She said, no, baby, that's too far. If you get sick in the night, I can't get there. I'm trying to get away from home, but I couldn't tell her that. So, and Hampton at the time, and I hate to put it this way, but it is true. It was more prestigious, and coming out of there would open different doors.
Mhm.
So she said, no, I need you to go to Hampton. Well, then the big discussion was I going to live on campus or was I going to live at home? And my desire was to live on campus so I could get away from home because I'd been the baby at home for a long time. And she said, no, you can commute because you have a car. We have a car for you. Well, I had 4 sister-in-laws, and 2 of them, all of them, I would say, started advocating for me because one of them had graduated from college in North Carolina and lived on campus. And she said, no, Mother Wilson, you need to let her live on campus because that's when you get the real experience of college. Mama said, no, she can come home every day. She has a car and we'll provide this and then the other. And they just kept saying, no, Mother Wilson, you really want her to live on campus. And by the time they were done and I was looking pitiful, I lived on campus. So my first year, and then my second year I moved back home. She was so happy. And then I went back on campus because I thought, no, being on campus is the place to be. And then in my senior year, I started dating my husband. He was my boyfriend. And in the dorm, when your guests came on Saturday, was it Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, they had to be out of the dorm by 10, the room by 10, not the bedroom. They had like a lobby area where we would sit and visit. They had to be out by 10 or 10:30. And that was the first semester. And I thought, at least at my mama's house, she let them stay to 11. So I went home the second semester of my senior year so my then boyfriend could at least visit with me for a little bit longer.
So were those dorms co-ed? Were separated by gender? How were they?
Oh, no, girl. I'm old enough. There were no co-ed anything. Because, uh, the funny part was, and I laughed because we took a daughter to Chapel Hill and Penn State, and our boys went to Chapel Hill. So, that was okay, boys. But it was interesting because the only way a boy could come into the dorm was if you were moving in or moving out, and he was helping you with your luggage or your items that you were carrying. And on those occasions, even when they were in the dorm, we had to holler, man on the hall, so that the girls would know. Because, sometimes they might be coming from the shower or something like that. So we had to scream, man on the hall, as we moved down the hallway so that the girls would be prepared. And then once they were dressed and ready, they would stick their head out the door to see who it was and, just giggle and just have a good time with that. But no. We even had a dorm mother, and we had to be in the dorm by 6 o'clock.
Okay.
And you had to sign in and sign out. And if you weren't back by 6 o'clock, she came to your room looking for you. And if you weren't there, you better be in the dorm. If not, you were going home. So it was very strict, because people sending their children away was a different mood back then than it is today.
So do you know if the boys' dorms were having the same kind of rules as the girls?
No, not at all. But they thought it was funny and fun to want to help us bring stuff in our dorm so they could see what the girls' rooms looked like and what, what it looked like inside, since it was such a sacred place. So, yeah.
So they were able to go into your building. Were you able to go into their building?
That's a good question because I never thought to ask. I had no reason to go in their building, and I would have had no explanation to my mother if she'd asked me if I'd been in there. So it never even occurred to me. And their buildings were across campus near the registration, the business building. So sometimes when I would go in there to pay tuition or to pick up something, I would just look at their building, but never tried to sneak in there, never tried to go. Mm-mm. My mother had me thinking she could see me within 30 miles of things. Because
I see.
she was strict, but she was very loving and kind.
So were there a lot of
Yeah.
women on
So it was
campus?
a great experience. Oh yeah, we outnumbered the guys. And my husband and I went to rival high schools and rival colleges. And oh my goodness, we had lots of females on campus and at the school because they had the commuting building where students who didn't live on campus could come and be there all day getting ready for class or whatever. But yeah, we did well with girls.
Were
I
you
did well
able?
with boys, but even as huh? I'm
It's okay,
sorry.
please finish.
Oh no, I was just saying it was just such an interesting time, and the rules were so different. For example, we had Saturday classes, but you could not wear pants on campus on Saturday during the weekend on Saturday. Saturday we could wear them, but you couldn't wear them to class. So what we did to disguise ourselves was we would put on our trench coat and put our jeans under our coat and roll them up to the top of our knees, and you couldn't see them. But we had some real interesting parameters that we had to live by. But it was okay.
Were you able to make any pants for you?
Oh yeah. Oh, you mean when I was in college
Yeah,
or afterwards? Not in
before.
college. Oh yeah, I used to make pantsuits for myself and for our daughter, and I made a suit for our younger son with the pants and the matching vest because he was like 4 or 5 years old, and we are big churchgoers, and I wasn't ready to put him in a suit yet because his older brother wore the suit type thing. So I made him a little outfit with a vest and the matching pants. So I sewed until we moved here in 1996. And I remember because even when we lived at home after we married, I made bedspreads and matching drapes for the bedroom because I love to sew so much. And my sister in law and best friend were also seamstresses. So we would all take a class or we'd get to one another's house and we would just do our thing. So sewing was a big part of my life for a long time. And then once I started with grad school at Chapel Hill, I was working on my doctorate. I didn't have time to sew or do much of anything, trying to just get my work done. But I used to love it. And then when the African attire came out very heavily being worn in the community to different activities, then I started making those things for myself, the skirts and the tops. So that, and I think I told you I made my husband a walking suit, and I made him. He was this particular fraternity he was in. When we lived in Hampton, they had a formal affair, and they asked the men to wear their colors and dashikis. You may not have ever heard that word, but dashikis were popular then. A man's shirt that was kind of full with the big long sleeves. So I made him a dashiki in his fraternity colors for that particular event, and I made him a robe, and different things like that.
I see. So were you able to participate
Hmm.
in any clubs during college as you were doing in high school? Were you able to continue with band or with your French club or any other clubs or activities?
No, I made a decision that I had to put all of my time on schoolwork. And I thought it was might have been a business club or something that I think I might have participated in. because that was directly related to my major. But I didn't do any sororities or extra clubs or anything like that.
So your major was business education, right?
This, my mother understood, so I put my time into getting that done.
Did you remember having any practicum classes?
Oh yeah, we had to do our student teaching
Uh-huh.
in local high schools, and I did mine at my husband's former high school, and the university provided transportation for us. That second semester we did student teaching, and our student teacher advisor from the university, of course, would come to observe us, and she would come with a suit on and white gloves on her hands and to observe us in our classes. And we knew we could, we didn't have to have gloves, but we knew we had to present ourselves in a very professional manner. And a part of that, too, was preparing us to be able to integrate and teach in white schools. And they prepared us in all kinds of ways to ensure our success in how we presented ourselves. Our subject matter, of course, was very important, but how we presented ourselves was also a big deal, and how we represented the university, and how I represented my mother. So it was just, it was a good time. It was, and when I was in the 12th grade, the other thing I got, and I didn't think of it as a club, I was a debutante, and that required us having meetings and them taking us to social and cultural events,
Mhm.
and then teaching us how to bringing in someone to teach us how to do the waltz for the cotillion. So that my senior year, I had a lot more uh, of engaging in activities through that organization than I did the other year. So I've had a wonderful life. I really have.
So you mentioned that when you were a kid, your school was segregated, but when it was your time to be a teacher, segregation in schools was over. Can you tell us a little bit about that era of civil rights? No, segregation was not over.
It was over if you look at what is it, 1954, the Great Law of that. But they didn't integrate for a long time, even after the law was passed. And we didn't expect that to happen. So we sort of maintained ourselves as we always had. What began to happen though was white high schools began to come to the black high schools to get the outstanding black athletes and get them to come to their schools. So if you didn't have some sort of skill set, even when they started with integrating the schools, but in terms of us going there in numbers, because we were being nurtured in the black schools by the teachers and by our parents and the other parents, and the fear of that being challenged and us being mistreated, we didn't. I can't think of any of my friends who parents tried to get them into a white school. No, we stayed right. We stayed put, and it was interesting because the Burton brothers were wonderful athletes at our high school, and there were two or three of those boys. And they were all just gifted. And I remember that Newport News High School was a white school uh, over town, and they came courting those boys, and their parents were social activists and all. So they allowed them to go to do the piece for integration. So it was kind of, it was interesting. Yeah. But no, we didn't go seeking that. We stayed safe.
You didn't feel safe? You thought you were not going to be safe in a white school?
That and that you weren't going to be judged academically fair. So our parents were pleased where we were because we had excellent teachers. They were all college graduates and some had master's degrees and things like that. But the idea that of course if we in both my husband and I went to black, they call them HBCUs, black colleges, historically black colleges and universities, and we both went to those. So we were fine. We were fine going to finishing where we were, and my husband even when he and one of his friends, my husband played a couple of sports in high school, and he and one of his best friends from the team, one of those teams, honored one of their coaches in the last 3 years. And I think the man is 90 some years old today, 92. And they set up, oh my goodness, a wonderful recognition for him, and invited the former players and things like that. Because see, what was happening, if part was the integration of the schools, if they took our black coaches, then they took them because they were producing good athletes. So that meant our schools would suffer in terms of the level of expertise and that kind of thing. So we kind of folks just sort of stayed put because they wanted to see sustain what we had created in our schools. So, but of course, by the time my children went to school, integration was in full force.
So how was your first job? Do you remember how did you get it? What kind of a school? Was it integrated? Was it not?
It's interesting you asked that because I taught English my first year out of college. Remember, I did the advanced English and I was good at English and stuff like that. So, and I did it in a place called Campbell County, Virginia, right outside of Lynchburg, Virginia, because I couldn't find a job teaching business ed because once teachers got those particular jobs, they stayed. So I got a call from the school in Campbell County. They needed an eighth grade English teacher. And we didn't have a definite minor, but if I had to say that I had a minor, it would have been English because of the business English and all the English I took at Hampton. So I went there and I taught eighth grade English. And the interesting part, though, was in that school, the integration came because I think there were 3 white teachers at that school, and that was it. No white children. And I used to have a soft heart for them sometimes because I thought, oh, okay, you have to now make the adjustments to work with and support black children. And I can't say that any of them weren't good teachers or anything like that, but I know the year I left, I only stayed a year, and then I came back and got a job in Hampton, Virginia, teaching business ed. Uh, uh, things seemed to be okay. The kids didn't do a lot of complaining, some, but not a lot. And the principal seemed to be okay with them being a part of his staff. So, yeah.
So do you remember what kind of subjects were these white teachers teaching at that school?
Oh my goodness. I believe social studies and maybe math. I don't remember one of them teaching English, but that's an interesting question. Yeah, I think social studies and maybe math.
And do you remember how was your relationships with your administrators at the schools that you were working?
Good. I had wanted to be a teacher for so long, and I wanted to be the best professional and the best teacher I could be. And I was also, and I'm going to say this because I've been told this, I was a good classroom manager and disciplinarian. And if my children misbehaved, I didn't run to the office for the principal to fix things. I took care of that in my classroom. And I established good rapport with the students because I knew if we got along with a level of professionalism and respect, we could do well. The only time I had, okay, that was in Lynchburg. The principal in Lynchburg was black. Then when I came to Hampton, I taught at Kecoughtan High School in Hampton. We were the Warriors. And one day I was walking down the hall. The principal was white. The assistant principal was black. The dean of girls was white. I think there was another assistant principal. And I was walking down the school because it was teacher work days. And I was going down the hall. I'd been in the office, and I was going down the hall, I think back to the auditorium. And the principal called me, young lady, young lady. He said, what do you teach? He said, do you teach Spanish? I said, no. Do you teach French? I said, no. he asked me, he said, well, what do you teach? I said, I teach business and I called his name. He didn't know my name or what I told him. And while he was having this conversation with me in the hall, the dean of girls was such a lovely lady. She was a white lady. She was lovely and had a great heart. She came around, no, no, sir, no, no. She's one of your new teachers. She's not a kid. She's not a student. And then he just said, oh, and he walked away. Well, after that, he knew who I was. So those kinds of things. The teachers in the building were rather embracing, white teachers, because let's say if there were 100 teachers, maybe 10 of us were Black. And I was raised to know how to get along with anybody and how to take care of myself in relationships with people and how to honor people's presence, including my own, and knowing that if we work together, we can get more done. And like a friend said one time at her retirement, if you don't care who gets the credit, you can get a lot done. And when I was at that school, that was my second job. I was asked to be in charge of the pep squad. And I loved it because, the kids could get together and hoop and holler, and we just practice whatever we want to yell at the game, that kind of thing. And it was a more leisurely gathering. So I got to know them really well. And if something wasn't going right in their lives, even if they weren't in my class, the Black kids would find me because they knew that they could trust me. And then when certain events were coming up, like the prom and things like that, and I would ask some students, I said, you going to the prom? I would ask the young lady. She said, no, I can't afford a dress for the prom. My mama can't afford that. And I said, what size do you wear? And I would buy, my husband and I would buy a dress. And he rented tux for some of the young men because they didn't have the type of clothing you wore to those events. And we wanted them to go, have fun, and be represented. So we've done a lot of that in our lives. And then we moved up here in 1974. We had our first son in Hampton. And then we moved up here, and I didn't work outside the home because I had a 3-year-old son and a husband working on a doctorate. So I was at home. And that was an interesting transition. And I didn't try to get into the school system then because, number one, I didn't think I would be able to because of where we live. I'll tell you a joke on you. During those years when we lived for the first time, if we were riding down the street going somewhere and I saw somebody Black, I would tell my husband, stop the car. He said, you don't. I said, there's somebody Black. He said, you don't know them. I said, I might. I was just that desperate to connect with somebody. And after our son had he was in the preschool lab on campus. And his daddy would take him to class in the morning. And by 9 o'clock, I had a job in the dean's office, I think. And I was secretary, doing clerical work, because I remember how the business is background. And at the end of my day, his day at 12:30, I would leave my job, pick him up, and we'd go home. And then we began to branch out in the neighborhood. There were 2 Black families at the time. And one day, this white lady and her little boy came to visit us. She said, I've seen you in the neighborhood at the sandbox. She said, and I wanted to introduce myself. And we got to be bosom buddies. She was so kind. And we both had boys, and then we both had another baby. I had another boy, and she had a girl. But Judy and I became just wonderful friends. And she understood how to work with what I was dealing with. And we would have lunch back and forth at each other's house, so our boys could play. They'd at the playground so they could play, and things like that. So I didn't try to get a professional job here the first time.
But then you went back to school. So what made you decide to go back to school?
Well, we left here in 1977. And my husband taught at Temple University. And we lived in Willingboro, New Jersey. And I don't even remember how I got this job. But I worked for New Jersey Civil Service as a business teacher
Uh-huh.
at a site not far from where we lived in Willingboro. And the purpose of the program was to reintroduce women who had either become divorced or had something happen in their lives where they were now single women with families. And New Jersey Civil Service started these courses, and I was seriously, I don't even remember how I got invited to do the job, but I taught Monday, Wednesday, Friday the business courses, and Tuesday and Thursday, and English, and the Tuesdays and Thursdays. But my white counterpart taught uh, math and something else. So it worked out perfectly having two little boys. And the name of that program was the WIN Project. And the WIN stood for Work Incentive Now. And the office that I reported to was in Newark, where the main office for the government was at that time. And I went there, interviewed, and I got the job. And the blessing was the job was 5 to 8 minutes around the corner from where we lived, in a building that they were renting. So when I went to work on those days, I had to unlock the building and get us the classroom straight and set up before the ladies came in. And that's when I got back into teaching. One of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had, because I was working with ladies whose husbands were colonels in the military who had left them for someone else, and they had no work skills. I had ladies who had never married but had children. I mean, I had a variety of women, and they were all unemployed. And the program was to get them employed so that they could become financially secure and more independent. Loved it. And one of the most wonderful, and build their confidence. I've been a motivational speaker too for lots of years. And to sort of get them to see themselves as still being worthy and capable. And we just loved one another. And they were afraid to go to the mall. They felt they could only shop at certain stores. And I said, no, because they would say, you always come in here looking so pretty. Where do you get your clothes? And I would tell them, they said, oh, no, we don't go to the mall. We don't go to Macy's. We don't. I said, why not? Because I'm thinking, you're white. You can go anywhere you want. And they said, no, they don't treat us right in there. I said, okay, we're going to work on that. So I got my boss to give me permission to take them to a mall nearby, I think in Newark. And he got me a van and everything so that I could take them. And I taught them how to shop. And because they didn't want to try on clothes because they thought the clerks would not let them, and they couldn't afford the clothes, I said, no, I'm going to show you how you can buy in Macy's even. And what I showed them was how to be cool in the store and just look around, and if a clerk approached you, say, oh, no, I'm just looking, and when I'm ready, I'll let you know. Because they were reluctant to even interact with the clerks. So after a while, I said, okay, now the next thing we're going to do is move to the clearance rack, because that's where all the good buys are that you can afford and that I buy too. So they couldn't believe it. So we went over, we were just cool and just slowly going through. And I said, and you can touch the clothes. You can move them on the rack and all that kind of stuff. So one lady with red hair found a brown pantsuit. And she said, oh, I love this. I said, try it on. She said, no, I can't afford that. And they're not going to let me try that on. I said, you can try it on and look at the ticket. I think it was like 75% off. Okay. She got so excited. I said, try the suit on. She came out. She looked gorgeous. She bought that suit. And shortly after that, she got a job. So what we started doing with her was, she would come, we said, the brown suit did it, girl. The brown suit got you that job. And any way I could encourage and motivate and support them to realize their value and worth, that was important. Well, that's always been important to me with people. And even when I taught high school, kids who were on welfare and tried to be kind of, hide them, said, no, babe, you're just as important as anybody else in here. So we lived there. My husband taught at Temple University then for 2 years. Then he was offered a job at North Carolina A&T College in Greensboro, North Carolina. That's an HBC. And we moved to Greensboro. And I didn't want to try and get back into the public school system because I'd been out for a while. And I went there pregnant and didn't know it. And then so we had a little girl there. So I worked as the administrative assistant to the president of the Black Bank in town.
Mhm.
Okay. And while we were there, my husband said, "You ought to go back to school and get a master's." I said, "What are we going to do with these three children?" I worked, I did the job at the bank, but he wanted me to quit and go back. And I said, "How are we going to do that?" He said, "We'll work it out." So I took a class at, oh, was the girls' college there? No, it was a girls' college there. I can't think of it right now. And I took a computer class, and I thought, "Oh no, I can't do this." And so USCG. So I have a very supportive and confident husband. He said, "Well, just go take a class over here." So I thought, I don't know. So then I started working on campus in the dean's office of biology and sciences. So then, after being there for a while, he was offered a job at NC State in Raleigh, North Carolina. I tell you his story because I've been following him, and out of that following him has come the things I have been encouraged or had the courage or the desire to do. So when we were in Raleigh, I went back to teaching at one of the high schools and interviewed for two jobs. And the man that hired me, his name was Johnny Farmer. So the kids used to ask me every day, "Miss Farmer, are you his wife or his sister?" I said, "Neither one. I have a husband." So, but anyway, loved it. And that was the first time I'd been back in teaching in 10 years. So then I loved it so much that, and if I'm telling you more than you want to know, stop.
No, like I'm just curious about that time. Your children were young, right?
Had one in elementary, middle, and high. And
Okay.
my father came and lived with us for 3 years. And he was at home waiting for the bus for the elementary daughter to come home. And we lived 4 blocks from the high school.
So while you were in the WIN project as well, your
I had
children, yeah,
two boys.
and they were at a school age, or they were still toddlers?
You want to hear the story for that for real? Okay. One was 4 and one was 7 going on 8. So that one was in elementary school. And when I got the job at the WIN program, I needed a sitter. Now, when I tell stories, I'm going to tell you just how they operated in my life. One day I was in the grocery store and I was in desperate need of a babysitter because my husband taught at Temple and we lived in New Jersey. So he couldn't keep anybody. So there were those little slips that people put their phone numbers on
Mm-hmm.
and they put babysitting. I didn't know anybody. I went up to those slips and I stood there and I read them. And with tears in my eyes, I said, "Lord, I need a babysitter. And this is the only place I know to get one from. And I'm trusting you to give me somebody safe to keep my baby." The lady I called was wonderful. She was the mother of she was black. They were from one of the islands. She was living with her daughter so she could babysit for her daughter's little girl. And she said, "Why don't we meet and we'll see?" She said, "Because I might be able to help you." And the good news was she lived in the same neighborhood where the 7-year-old was in school, in elementary school. And she was the sweetest lady. So we would drop them off at her house in the morning. Shama could walk to school because it was near where she lived. And Eric stayed with her and played with her granddaughter. And that was how I was able to work with having the two kids.
I see. And talking about back to the WIN project, were there a lot of projects at the time to help women that were left without their husbands or unemployed? Or was this like a unique thing?
There were federal programs being created,
Mm-hmm.
and the government was sustaining some of these programs because the military piece and all that. And my husband was in the military and went to Vietnam. So with all of that tracking coming back and the military being, and then they also had the draft, back in the day as well. So my understanding was they were trying to create opportunities for women so that they too could either take care of themselves or either help support a household. But primarily, the ladies that we dealt with were ladies who just had no skill set and very little confidence and low paying jobs. And it was the most amazing thing what that program did for those ladies.
Okay. So let's go back to that job that you love so much after all that time not teaching, and how did you jump from there to going back to school?
Okay. I started teaching at the high school and I was teaching in the business department and having a good time. And I had one of the principals in another building asked me to be his assistant principal.
Okay.
Okay. According to the people I've worked with, I've been pleasant and good to work with. I knew what I was doing, and I was supportive of the people in my department, and I took care of people's children. And I honored the rules and regulations of the environment where I worked. So this guy had seen me do things, and we had been in, and every time there was a professional workshop that a teacher could go to, my principal sent me to them. And in those workshops, you sit down and people ask a question, you raise your hand and you have input. So one day he approached me, he came to see my principal and he wanted to know if he could talk to me. And he asked me about being the assistant principal for him. I said, I don't have a master's. So he said, well, we'll see what we can do. So anyway, I couldn't get the job because I didn't have the master's. So then my husband says to me, then you need to go back and get your master's. I said, how am I going to do that? We have 3 children and I've been out of work for 10 years. You need me to have a job. No, man, we can make it. And the assistant principal at the high school, everybody in administration in my building was just very supportive. You need to do that. You need to try that because you could do this. And one of the assistants, my husband directed me to take a leave of absence, not to quit my job. And during my careers, I have been sent by my principals to do professional development to come back to be a trainer for schools in the district. One year, we were allowed 5 professional work days a year. One year, I had 25 because my principal, if anything came up, he would call me to his office. Ms. Farmer, they need somebody over here to learn to do diversity training. Can you go do that? I said, you think I can? He said, I know you can. That's why I called you up here. So I said, okay. So then I became a certified diversity trainer for the school district. So then they would pull me out to go to schools to train teachers, white teachers, how to work with black boys, black children, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And out of that, and the conversation about the guy wanting me to be his assistant principal, my husband kept saying, you need to go back to school. And I thought, I can't do that. So one of the professional developments I did, North Carolina started a program of North Carolina Teaching Fellows. And there was a representative from each high school to identify and encourage high school seniors to become teachers, minority students. Okay. So my principal selected me to be the teacher recruiter at my high school. So there was a workshop for us somewhere up in the mountains somewhere. And the dean of education at the girls' college in Raleigh was there. And we were sitting and chatting, and we had done workshops together. She said, well, you need to be an administrator. I said, how? I said, I have 3 children. I had a little bunch. I have 3 children, and my husband needs me to work. She said, well, we're going to start a program at Meredith for people who are teaching and want to get their master's. And I want you to come into it. I said, okay, let me talk to my husband. Well, he thought it was great. So I took the leave of absence one day, and the next day, I went over to her building to talk about entering the program. And she says to me with a sad face, Barbara, I don't know how to tell you this, but the university didn't fund our program. I thought, okay. You know, I'm an adult woman. You can't sit and holler and cry at the lady's office and call her names. I thanked her, and I was headed for the van. Now, as you know me, you'll know I'm going to say what I believe and think. On my way to the van, the Spirit spoke to me and said, go home, call your husband and do exactly what he tells you to do. I thought I couldn't get home fast enough. I drove like a. I got home. I called him because he was teaching at NC State then. I called him. I said, "Okay, Spirit told me to call you." I said, "Number one, the program didn't materialize at Meredith. Number two, I've already left my job and I don't have a job today. What did he tell you to tell me to do?" He said, "You'll go to A&T." I said, "Which one?" He said, "Baby, there's only one." I said, "But that was in Greensboro. That was an hour and a half or more from where we live." I said, "And how am I going to get there?" He said, "You'll drive." I said, "No, you go back. He didn't hit the right message. Because you know I don't drive distances and I cannot drive myself to A&T and I don't want to go that far away from home." Well, Edgar used to teach at A&T. So he calls the guy in education and says, "Henry, Barbara's going to get her bachelor's and I'm going to bring her to A&T." He took a day off of work, drove me to Greensboro. And just like you're sitting where you are, they're sitting at a desk and I'm sitting at a chair on the other side of the room watching them plan my future. And at the end of the meeting, I had two graduate classes to take at A&T. I don't think I talked to Edgar all the way home because I didn't understand how I could be in two classes and I couldn't even get to the school. So then he says to me, "Take Becky with you and put her in a summer program." Our daughter, she was in 6th grade. And I said, "How am I going to take her and I can't take myself?" So he said, "You can do it. You can do it." His favorite phrase is, "You can do it." Well, Becky and I would get up like 5 o'clock in the morning, get ready, go by Hardee's, get breakfast, and head to A&T. The first day we went, my prayer was, if she comes, and we enrolled her in a program, a summer camp. I said, if she comes across the street from that building looking unhappy, we're not coming back here another day. So I'm sitting in the van after class, around 4 o'clock. Here comes Becky coming across the street, all hugged up with 2 girls, just having a good time, laughing her hips off. I said, something ain't right. She gets in the van. I said, "How was it?" "Great, Mommy. I met some kids. I met 2 girls, and their daddy knows Daddy." Okay, that takes care of that. But you know what she was so excited about? Seeing so many black children. Because in Raleigh, she was in an integrated school, all of them. She said, "Mom, there's so many black girls in there and so many black kids. We just had a good time." And I thought, okay, I'm going to have to make this drive so my baby can have a good time. So we did that, and her godparents live in Greensboro. So her godmother said, "Well, instead of driving it every day, why don't you all stay with us during the week and go home on weekends?" I said, "No, I can't impose." We did it for a week. I called the godmother and said, "We will be there Monday morning." So we started staying in the godmother's house in Greensboro during the week and going home on Friday evening. And it worked for her. And my classes were in the morning. I took 3 classes. And in the afternoon, I was in the library. And there were 2 other ladies who were in a similar predicament, not with distance because they lived in Greensboro. And we would go in there and we would take different parts of the homework or the assignment and work on that and then get together and discuss what we had learned. Well, by the time I knew it, summer school was over. And I had taken, I think, 3 classes. I couldn't believe it. So since I had resigned, taken a leave of absence from the school systems, I thought, okay, I'm going back home. But when I got back, the person in charge of personnel for the school system called me. She said, "You want a job?" I said, "I already left my job. How am I going to do a job?" She said, "I have something else that you might be interested in, and you can do it and go to graduate school." I said, "Okay, what is it?" They needed a teacher assistant for attendance in a middle school in the school system. She said, and I worked with attendance. And she knew what kind of job to give me because she knew I was in graduate school.
Yeah.
So I thought, oh my goodness. So I took that job. And it was closer to Greensboro. It was about 30 minutes closer. So I would do various things. I was substitute if teachers were absent. And my degree at A&T let me use it as my, what do you do when you practicum for being an administrator. So one day I was walking down the hall and the principal there was a black female. And I was walking down and she said, "Don't you have a class?" I said, "I do." She said, "Well, why are you still here?" I said, "Because I don't get off to such." She said, "Girl, go to school. Get out of here and go to school." And I thought, "You sure?" She said, "Go to school." So I had people supporting, and the young lady I worked with attendance, She loved me, and she would say, "You get to the desk back there in the corner, and I'll do attendance. And if I need you, I'll call you up here to the equipment." So I had a support system at home and on my job. And then one day, the supervisor for the practicum came to observe me. And we were just talking in the hall, and as he's walking out, he said, "You know, you need to get your doctorate." I said, "I think you understand. I'm trying to get a master's right now so I can get another level job." He said, "No, but you need to get your doctorate." I said, "What makes you think I can do that?" He said, "Because once you start working in the school system, doing the assistant principal stuff, you're going to realize you're just as smart as those people and can do just as good a job as them. And then you're going to be mad because you can't get the job they have in down in central office because you don't have the degree." I made the mistake of telling Edgar what he said. Edgar said, "Well, just go get your doctorate." I thought, I don't get it. I just don't get it. You know you need me to work. But when I came back from the master's, excuse me, I received 2 calls from principals wanting me to come interview to be their assistant principal. And I was ready to go back to work. And I thought, I made the mistake of telling Edgar, they called me too. And then our daughter was in a Saturday Academy type program for Black kids. And they would take them to different colleges. They would teach them, give them different classes on college campuses, all kinds of enrichment experiences. So I went to take her one Saturday, and a teacher that used to teach with me at my high school was there with her daughter. And she was going to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, getting her doctorate. And we were chatting. She said, "Girl, you should come over there too and get yours." I said, "You don't understand. Number one, I'm not doctorate material. Number two, Edgar needs me to work." I went home and I made the mistake of telling Edgar what she said. So then after that, he said, "Well, call the dean and go talk to him." And I said, "No." So then finally I called. So I told Edgar, I said, "I can't reach him. I can't get through it. Nobody's answering the phone." Edgar said, "Well, what's his number?" Edgar called the dean and got an appointment for me. And the two of us went over to Chapel Hill for my interview with the dean of the College of Education. And by the time I was done, the man wanted to know, "What can we do to get you to come?" I was so scared. I was shaking in my shoes. Because, see, I had already been on the journey with Edgar getting his doctorate. I was his typist, his editor, everything that he needed. But he did the work. But I did all those things. And I thought, no, that's a lot of work, and that's a lot of this. And he said, "What you can do." His favorite phrase, "You can do it." So, and then they gave me the Z. Smith Reynolds Award. So that paying for school was taken care of. I thought, okay. The first semester, I was such a wreck, I got shingles. I was so nervous being over there, thinking I was out of my league. And in our classes, and I was in a group of 10. There were 10 of us in that group. And I was in a class. And in the classes that we were in, we were the only Black people that I could see. And all of the professors, except my advisor, were white. I thought, Jesus, how are we going to do this? And I would go spend the day. And when I was done with class, I would go to the library. And I came up with a study group because there were 3 other ladies who were former teachers. So we started working together, and we had a room downstairs in the education building. And we would put our heads together down there, or we would go to lunch. And I realized I could do the work. And then I also realized there was a lot of reading and a lot of work to do. So I realized when I got to class and the class started, I said my stuff first. And then I said, because I don't want to sit here an hour and a half and try to wait until you get to something I get excited about. And lo and behold, it worked. I had a good time. And the work was doable. And it blew my mind. And my husband just smiled. "I told you could do it." Because he's always told me I was smart and I could do things. But I don't know. I just didn't see myself in that light at that time.
So what made you think you were not smart enough with all the efforts and all the encouraging words that you received and you were giving?
I I don't know, just a certain, I don't know. Because yes, I do know. Because the people we knew with those degrees that were Black were at our colleges. Well, I had no desire to be a college professor. And So I figured that was not for me. And I was so proud of him when he got his doctorate. I thought, you got a black man with a doctorate. You doing it, babe. You know, that sort of thing, because that wasn't common for us. And 98% of our friends either had the undergraduate degree or the master's. And then when I was at Hampton, something struck me too, but I didn't verbalize it. I loved seeing the black professors on that campus. And one of them was so friendly. He was, how you doing today, young lady? How are things going? And I thought, pretty good. And he would just make me feel so welcome. But because the most of the people I saw with that degree were not black. That's the best answer I can give. Because I was good in school when I was in elementary and high school and stuff like that. And and my husband has always told me that I was smart. You think, well, you're supposed to tell me that because you love me, but and you're my husband. But and the other piece that helped me was in supporting him in doing his work. I would read his papers and edit those, and then I would type them. I was like, oh, and that's interesting. And one day he was working on a paper, and he had several authors, and he gave me the guy's paper. He said, "Babe, please fix this because this isn't good." I read. I said, "This is terrible. I could have done this." So he started me to become a writer, and the building blocks just kept getting higher and higher, and I gained. And so many. It was interesting. So many people were confident in me and happy for me. And the other part too was I didn't want to start anything I couldn't be successful at within a certain time frame. Because remember, I'm the baby of the family. The expectations for me doing anything were high. And then I married a smart husband who was doing things. And you keep a low profile and you just inch up. But Edgar just would not. And when we left Chapel Hill that day, he said, "Man, I told you." I thought, okay, we'll see. And the professors were wonderful. And I realized I could write what they wanted. And I enjoyed being on the campus.
Nice. So after you got your PhD, how did you get your job as principal here in State College?
I have an EDD. I have a doctorate of education. Um, Ask me that question again.
How did you get your job as a principal in one of our schools here in State College?
You know, I've been blessed to be invited to do different kinds of things. Uh, because I tell people, don't have me participate in something if you don't really want to know what I think. So I didn't work the first year out of the home when we came. I was finishing up my research and my dissertation. One day our daughter calls and says, "Mom, you have to come to the high school. The boys have done are mistreating some girls. They have made a list of girls' body parts and put their name on the list, and they're passing it around." I thought, oh no, how stupid can they be? Just how silly can they be? "Mom, you have to come over here and do something." Well, when your children call for you to come. So I called the assistant principal and I let her know what I had been made aware of. I said, "I'm going to come over and meet with you." She said, "Please come." So when I got there, she said, "Barbara, I'm not," because everybody was white. She said, "I am not accustomed to dealing with these kinds of situations. Can you help me?" Because I used to teach peer mentoring and peer mediation. That was a part of my job, even as a business teacher. And those students would come to me to learn skills and about diversity in the skill set. 2 days, 2 days a week, and 3 days a week, they would go out and mentor at our feeder elementary and middle schools, the skills they had learned. So I told her about my work history. She said, "Would you please help me with this?" And because the parents want to meet, and I have to meet with these children. I said, "Okay." So she had a meeting with the parents, and I was one of the parents as well. And the guidance counselor introduced me, I think, as a diversity person or something like that. And and the girls were black and white. So we sat in there and we talked about different things. And I heard what they wanted done, and something has to be done. So at the end of the meeting, I was asked to facilitate a meeting with the students. So I met with the counselor, and I met with this circle of students on the stage in the high school auditorium. And I said, and she introduced me. So I said, I'm going to start out first by letting the black boys in the room know that I'm very disappointed in you. I brought a young black teenager here, and I expected if anybody was going to treat her right and take care of her, that you would. And you need to know, I'm hurt. And then I just went into all of it about how to treat a girl and try to treat anybody. You don't do that kind of thing. So out of that, the counselor recommended the district at the time was creating a diversity committee. I think they had a diversity committee. And the counselor, of course, was white. And she said, Barbara, would you come to she spoke with the superintendent, I think. And I got a call, would you come to our next diversity meeting and share with us about how we can da. I said, okay. And I did that. From that, I was asked to be on the diversity committee for the school district. And we met frequently. And oh, I loved it because you come to understand some people don't even know what they don't know. So between that part of the group and the people who were ready to make a change for the kids in the district, that kind of, and the superintendent, we met frequently, and it was good. And out of that, the district's one of the teacher work days was a full diversity day, and we brought people in from different areas. And from the meetings, I think we were probably at the end of the year, and if something was going on in the meeting, I had a young black friend there who was in high school. We would go to the same church, and he would tell, "Oh, Barbara, say something, say something." And that somebody said something that just didn't make sense. So I had a good time helping people to understand. So toward the end, I leaned over to the superintendent one day. I said, "You do know I need a job, right?" And he said, "Didn't you know I've been courting you for a job all year?" I said, "No, but I do need one." He said, "Call my secretary and come meet with me." I said, "Okay," and I did. And the day of the meeting, I walked into his office, and I know there were at least 15 people in there, all white folk. I thought, "Oh my goodness!" So we're gonna have a party up in here. I said, "But we can do it." So I sat down and I started answering their questions. And after that, uh, he offered me a job. And then I met with the school board prior to that, and they were very welcoming. I'll tell you this story because I don't want to keep you much longer. At the school board meeting, I didn't realize until I was told this part later. And I was told by one of the members after he'd come off the board one day I was downtown. He said, "You know how we got you hired here?" I said, "I'd heard a little something." He said, "Well, let me tell you." He said, "I was talking to his brother-in-law, I think, who lived in Cary, North Carolina. And the brother-in-law knew of my reputation in the Wake County school system. And the school board member told him my name and that they were looking at me to hire me as a principal." And he said, the man said, "If you can get her, you better get her." I'll be honest, it gives me chills telling you because I'm thinking, nobody up here knows me, not from, there. And the school board interviewed me. And one of the ladies on the school board told me later, she said, "I didn't realize you were black until later." She said, "Because the day we interviewed you, all I could see was your heart." She said, I didn't know you were black." And they kept saying, "Bonnie, didn't you see?" I saw, but I didn't see her color. And we became best friends. And she was one of my parents. And I mean, she was a local business owner. And she just sort of, and the people on the school board were very kind and very, very good to me. They really were. So, and I felt secure because I had been an assistant principal of a couple of schools in Raleigh. And I was aware that there were no black teachers. There wasn't anybody black in it, not even a custodian or a cook. It's usually they give us those jobs, black folks those jobs. And when I went in, the secretaries were just wonderful. And then as the teachers started trickling back in for the beginning of the school year, and I guess it's okay to say, but my art teacher came in. And I just loved her right away. We just hit it off. And then teachers started coming in during the day and, during the week and stuff. And it just, my comfort zone just increased because I didn't feel that there was any problem for me with them, my being black. And I may have had half a dozen black children in the school.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. One night we had a PTO meeting, and there was one black family in the audience, and I knew her. She was from my church too, but she lived in the neighborhood. I thought, whoa, okay. But they were very supportive, and those who didn't feel that they could be were outnumbered by those who felt that they could be. And as time passed and we did relationship building and people, I mean, I owned stock in Panera, I think, because I would take a bag of bagels and stuff and I had two buildings, K through 3 and K through 2 and 3 through 5. So I'd take a bag to each building and to put them in the teacher's lounge and I spent time with teachers, trying to get to know them and what they were teaching and how they felt about that, things like that. And I loved it. It came with its challenges. Lord knows it did. But my mother taught me there was a way to do and say anything. Okay? She also taught me that getting along with people. Because remember, I grew up in a segregated society. And I had to be, if I wanted to go to a store that sold the kinds of things we wanted to wear, we had what we call downtown and overtown. Downtown was where the Jewish merchants had their stores and where the blacks shopped. Overtown were where the white merchants and some Jewish merchants as well, but the Lavogues and the big stores, and Montgomery Ward, see, all those stores were over there. And my mother taught me how to go to those stores and get my needs met. We never had to fuss. We never had to argue with anybody. As a matter of fact, we had certain clerks. One clerk in one store knew we loved Sunday hats. Because on Sunday, if you didn't go to church, you didn't go anywhere else because you weren't able to. You must have been sick. So my mother and I had, I guess, just a little bit larger head. And when she would get the new hats in each season, she would check the size and try them on, and she would put the ones that she knew fit us in a drawer because she knew we were coming. So we would go shopping for Easter or whatever. And she said, when she saw us coming, ladies, I've been waiting on you. And all the clerks, everybody was all white. And she said, I put something aside for you. And she was so excited. And she would pull out these, and she knew what to put aside for us. And 9 times out of 10, my mother bought all the hats that she had put aside. So we were trained as blacks how to survive and get, I'm telling you, no matter where you were. And so when I'll tell you one other thing I did. Along the way when I was in Hampton, I worked at J.C. Penney's. I was the only black sales clerk they had on the floor. And, excuse me, and that was interesting too, but, people, I was in the boys department and people wrote, they dealt with that pretty well. One day a lady came in and she had, and edit all of this you need to, came in and she had a little boy that was about 5 and a little girl. And the little boy apparently hadn't seen anybody black. And he would inch close to me because he was trying to touch me. And each time she saw him, she would jerk him back. And finally she turned her head and he did like this. He rubbed my hand and looked at his finger to see if the color was going to come off. She caught him doing that. Oh my goodness. She put down everything she was going to buy. She grabbed him by the arm and yanked him out of the store. And I said, no, he's fine. I'm not upset. But she was turning red and she was real upset. But I knew I could still close to anybody. And I kept that job during the summers and the holidays when I was at college. And that helped, me to get pretty stuff for school. So, but we were raised to know how to keep our emotional and physical selves safe.
What an amazing life, Dr. Farmer. So at the beginning of our interview, I introduced you as a trailblazer educator. How would you introduce yourself?
I'm married to the best husband in the world. I've got the 3 best children in the world who love me, my husband. And throughout the years, we have moved a lot. We've moved 14 times. And part of that came about because Edgar was offered a job at another university. So we would pack up and go. And I knew early on that I had to be his support person on his job. And even if they had events, I had to go and be his partner there. I knew that many of the communities we lived in, because we had to buy houses sometimes in white communities so we could sell them quickly, more
Yeah.
quickly than if we lived in a black community. So we had that experience with that. And my husband has been a runner. He's run several marathons. So even out here where we live now, how many? I think there are 300 and some units, and two of us are black families. But everybody knows my husband because he's a walker, and he has a walking group of men out here. And I can go to the grocery store and they say, "Oh, you're Edgar's wife." I said, "Yes, I am," because I have, we're a team, and each place we've gone, someone has reached out and said, "Well, Barbara, what do you do? What are you doing?" And I would tell them, "Well, are you looking for a job?" I said, "Well, I could. I said I could have. That would be fine. Well, go see so and so, or oh, did I mess up?
No, you're okay. I can still see you.
Okay, okay." Or they would say, "Well, come see me. I need somebody to do such and such a thing." So that became the doorway many times. And as a matter of fact, when we were living in Greensboro, Edgar had gotten a job at NC State. We were at a farewell banquet for him on A&T's campus. And this gentleman walked up to me, and I knew who he was because he was the vocational supervisor for the state. Because Edgar is a vocational teacher as well. And he said, "Well, Barbara, what are you going to do in Raleigh?" He said, "Aren't you an educator?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I need a job." And he said, "Well, what do you teach?" And he said, he took out a card. He said, "Get an appointment, call Julia Mobley at this number. Tell her I told you to call her and give you a job, or you need a job." I thought, okay, he says that, I'm going to do it. I called, I got an appointment. And when I first got there, Julia was on a phone call with her secretary, and I sat and chatted. Now, the other thing we were trained in our education program was, if you're going for a professional interview, you must look like a professional person if you want somebody white to hire you, in particular. But also to make the black people proud that you're dealing with. So I had on my blue suit, my white blouse, my blue shoes, my blue pocketbook, my hair done, and I was sitting and we talked and talked until she said, "Julie's off the phone, so you can go in there." So I got up to go into the office and I thanked her for being so kind and taking the time with me. She said, "We'd be lucky if we could get you in this school district." I said, "Okay, thank you." I'm thinking, we just talked. We just had a regular conversation. And they sent me on 2 interviews. She did. The first one I went to was a white female principal. And she said, "I've never done this before, but I'm going to offer you a job today because I want you at my school." I said, "Well, I have another interview this afternoon at the high school with Mr. Farmer." She said, "Oh, well, that means you won't be back." I said, "What do you mean I won't be back?" She said, "He's not going to let you come back." So I had to interview, and that principal's name I went to interview with was Mr. Johnny Farmer. So Mr. Farmer interviewed me and we talked. And he said, and that was the first year computers were put into the high school. I was a wreck. So then he gave me a job. And I went home and I said, "I got a job. I'm supposed to teach computers." Like I said, okay. He took me to the mall. We went to a technology store. He brought me some computer books. And we had a computer at home. He said, "You can do this. Remember the favorite phrase, you can do this?" And
And you did it.
Started working, and I did. And then Mr. Farmer sent me all over the state to represent the school district and our school for business ed and for diversity. And I got my diversity training through the trainers that they brought in through the Wake County school system. And then they would, if a certain school was having difficulty, let's say with teachers not knowing how to handle black boys, I was one of the black boy trainers. So they would call me and say, "Such and such a school needs some training on teaching teachers how to work with black boys." And the school would get me a substitute, and I would go spend the day there and do whatever and work with the teachers. So, but out of one thing that I did, somebody else recommended me or called me to do something else. And
Because
that's,
they recognize your talent.
well, I just feel so blessed. But I have thoroughly enjoyed the jobs I've had, the people I've worked for, and the people I've worked with. And at the Renaissance Fair, banquet, my superintendent did said some words for me, and I tell you, it brought me to tears because I truly loved working for her and with her, and she was one of the most supportive and kindest people I've ever dealt with.
So
So
looking back to everything that you have experienced so far, what makes you feel the most proud of your younger self?
my younger self, taking the risk and embracing my husband's dream and believing that I'll find something to do when I get there or something will show up for me. But I don't think in any of the moves, except the one from Greensboro to Raleigh, I knew what my job was going to be when I arrived. But I had this wonderful husband who is a visionary, who believes very deeply in what I'm capable of doing, very complimentary about what I do in terms of the things because we've been a team for 55 years. We've been married 55 years, and we've been supporting each other and taking each other going back and forth wherever we needed to go. Uh, Even to the point I've been to Taiwan 5 times, and I've been celebrated over there in ways that just blow me away. But because we did some co-teaching over there, and we did 20 some speeches, and but I do know between the goodness of the Lord and the husband that I had, and the children that we have who are they're wonderful. I have been loved and I have been supported, and I believe the Lord has used all of that to bless me to do the things I've done.
Well, Dr. Farmer, as we close our interview, I would really like to thank you for sharing your story with me and our audience. It was an honor to hear all your story, and I am excited about the impact that it will have. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care now.
You too. So
All
we
right,
can like officially stop here now.
okay.
Thank you so much for everything.
I hope I didn't tear up your time with my stories, but they are a part of who I am.
No, of course, and we discovered so much about you. I mean, besides your wonderful experiences, how much you move and all your different life experience and everything that you brought to the table, besides what you received. And I think you should give yourself way more credit than you say, because you talk a lot about the people that supported you,
Yeah.
but I can see that you have been a really hard worker, a really
Oh,
caring person, and people recognize that they were not giving you opportunities just because.
well, I appreciate that, and I must throw this in. From the job in the district, I got called from the diversity committee to doing stuff downtown and being chair of the Martin Luther King
Mm-hmm.
committee for the what is that? The you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, like the Black
And,
History Month and all the
yeah,
celebrations.
and then I, I got to go to the March on Washington when I was in high school, and that all I've had just wonderful opportunities that people have selected me to do and be a part of.
Okay, so we are going to go back to that because I would love to have that as a part of our interview. And with the editing process, I can have that. So I'm going to ask you about the civil rights movement. And maybe you can tell me about like your march in Washington. Sounds good?
You know, when all of that was happening.
Give me a
I,
minute. Let me frame the question
okay.
because
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
think exactly where I want to put it right now.
Okay.
So you mentioned like the father of some of those school athletes were social activists. Can you tell
Mhm.
me a little bit more about the civil rights movement? Did you know about the Civil Rights Act?
Oh, we were
You
very much
ever
aware of it.
participated?
And we did some very limited things because, again, remember during our time in the 50s, when we were in elementary school and then on up in high school, the threat to us was even more, we felt even more dangerous because remember we had our own neighborhoods and we didn't want to upset anything that people felt they could come into our neighborhoods and create harm for us. And we had a neighbor who was a friend. And my parents were very much into the TV and watching what the political situation was, and they were voters and things like that. But we had a neighbor who was a black businessman. And a friend of his lived 2 doors down from my mother. And his name was Mr. Perea. And he would stop and chat sometimes. And he knew I was in school and that I wanted to go to college. So he would talk to me about that. And he said, well, do you do anything with the politics? I said, no, Mama won't let me because she's afraid, what might happen. Well, he was knee deep into politics. And my mother trusted him. And he took me one weekend, one Saturday, to a rural area in Virginia, to this White House where people were working, poll workers and people getting ready for the next upcoming time to vote. And at first I thought, oh my goodness, I stuck to him like glue because there were several white men and I think maybe 1 or 2 white women, but everybody was white. And just me and Mr. Pete, with Mr. Curry, he knew them all, see, so he was very comfortable. And he taught me things to pay attention to, how to go about participating in whatever role they gave me at the polls, that kind of thing. Well, that kind of lit a little fire under me in terms of wanting to come back and be more of an advocate for Black folk or speaking to the situation. And our church took us to the March on Washington. That's the only reason I could go. My mother wouldn't let me go just with anybody. And we talked about those things at Sunday school because I loved Sunday school. And my Sunday school teacher was very up on political issues and things of the time. So we had an awareness, but there was still that hesitation as to how deeply you go into that. Well, after that, and in our moving, we have worked the polls and different things for during the times when we have elections coming up. So through the years, we've gotten more active with that. And we've had people call on us to do certain kinds of things. And those things that we are free to do, we do. And of course, we vote. But all of that came out of that time. And we had to learn how, though, to protect ourselves and be careful. So as much as teaching me about how to maneuver at the poll in terms of giving people their whatever, we also had to learn how to protect ourselves and not be attacked or hurt at the poll.
So you said that you went to the march in Washington with your church.
Yeah.
So tell me more about this.
That took a bus of young people because they too were trying to, because they knew we were the upcoming generation who would have to walk knee deep in integration and to understand how that works and then come back and share it with them. And I remember sitting in the tree for a while and just amazed at the number of Black people who were there, but just as even more amazed at the number of white people who were there, and seeing that there was the camaraderie and the caring. Oh, so that sort of lit something in me, and that might have been the beginning of my diversity training need. Because after that, if there was something going on even at school or if at Hampton and we were just marching around the camp, but I knew what my limit could be because I knew that my mother's fear of something happening to me. But I don't know if I had really thought about it in that way until you just asked me that. That the March on Washington played a real deep part in my getting more deeply involved in the political scene.
Well, I'm so glad we were able to talk about that impactful event for you and for the United States.
Absolutely. And even today, when I was working with the borough, with the Martin Luther King Committee, and different things that, what else did we do? I was on the committee for policing people of color at Penn State,
Mhm.
and we did a couple other things, trying to get a community director for diversity in the borough. I was on that committee, and my husband and I began to be called in, as there were times when there were critical things that happened in the borough, and we would get a call to come to the meeting so that we could have the conversation in the room with black and white.
Mhm.
That's what are the next steps and how do we handle this? And one of my themes always was we've got to tell the truth because because we want to keep our trust. We want the community to continue to be trusted about everybody who lives here. So we've had an interesting journey. We really have, and we still do things, but not as much because we're getting older now. And some of the things that people have given me awards for, I was doing not paying attention to doing because it takes all of us to make a difference in our community. And so,
But we need leaders.
bless your heart. And I often tell the town manager, we are going to be, what is it? We're going to be the model city.
Yeah.